Hello, everyone. Great to have you here for our latest eCommerce Explored webinar session. We are talking about cross-border in this one. Just how do you increase those overseas sales? I can see we've got some of you logging in already, so I'm going to rather than waffle too much at you, I'm going to get straight to the heart of things. So get my script up so I don't forget anything. It is awesome to have you all tuning in to this eCommerce Explore webinar. This time we are getting into that ever more crucial part of the e-commerce growth journey, selling overseas. eCommerce Explored exists to discuss and hopefully find answers to the questions e-commerce brand decision makers like all of you tuning in to watch this are wrestling with right now, such as where to find growth in increasingly competitive home markets. Let's face it, that is a big old question for next year. But does the grass just look greener overseas, or is there really profitable sales growth to be had? In this session, we're going to be getting into all of that and exploring the top do's and don'ts for making overseas selling work for you and answering some of your questions as well, hopefully. So get ready for lots of ideas and insights. We have loads of time for you to get your questions answered, and I love it when you drive the conversation. So please do add your questions to the Q&A box that you will find on the right hand side of your screen. You can start adding them right now. I strongly advise you not to wait until 10 minutes to go for two reasons. Usually I give you one reason, which is because I won't have time to ask it of the panelists. It's a waste of typing. But the other reason is because one of our panelists has to leave early today. I'm not going to tell you who. You'll have to work that out as we go because they'll disappear off the screen. But they have to leave early. So if you leave it to the end, they're not going to be able to answer your question either. So make sure you get your questions in early if you've got them for you. I suspect with a topic like this, you may have something in your head already that you want answers to. So add that in. The other cool thing about adding your questions on that box, in that Q&A box on the right-hand side, is that the panelists like to get typey. Okay, my panelists like to get typey. They frequently will come back to you with suggestions, answers, whilst the rest of us are talking. They'll disappear off for a bit and start. I'd love to know if Tinashe really know who's leaving early. And Edward Scott Finnegan, great to have you back, Ed. Always cool to have you here. So we've got two of you already adding comments in there. So you must be able to work out where it is. So please do get those questions in. And as I said, two things: ask them early, and you may well get answers from our panelists via text form whilst we are chatting about all the other stuff. Right, check what I failed to tell you. Have I failed to tell you? No, I think we're good. I think I've told you everything we need to tell you. Okay, let's take a look at who our panelists are for this session. I'm still not going to tell you who's leaving early, though. These are the panelists who are going to be joining us very, 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 very soon. So we have Max O'Brien from Global E. We've got Emma Jones from the Department for Business and Trade. Yeah, we've got the UK government kind of on this one. And we've got Rebecca Griffiths from Premise. But I should say, given that Emma is here very much representing UK export trade, this is not UK specific. I think you'll find like 99% of the advice we get in this session is going to be applied to you, whether you're trying to sell from the Philippines to Australia or whether you're trying to sell from the US into Europe. So keep those get those questions coming, please, everybody. Okay, right. It's time we let our lovely panelists come up on stage and tell you all a little bit about themselves. So I would love it if each of you, we've already got a question. Cool. Thank you, Malandi. Right, I would love to know, and the audience would love to know a little bit more about each of you, your areas of expertise, who you work for, that good stuff when it comes to selling cross-border. Rebecca, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll go clockwise around the screen. So Rebecca, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks for having me, Chloe. Good to see you again. And yeah, love all this stuff. So, and cross-border is everything I love and more. So thank you for bringing me on. So yeah, my name's Rebecca Griffiths. So I'm the founder and CEO of Premise. So we're specialised in everything post-purchase. So we can take control after the customer has made that transaction on their website. And through our data, technology, insights, and that branded white glove experience, we work with many retail brands across the world to really control that final mile experience, which to me is the most emotional part of that journey. So yeah, really excited to kind of be on this and explore lots of different synergies, what different markets we're looking at. I've got some opinions on certain markets that I think are booming and some markets that are not so much. But yeah, thank you for having us, and yeah, really keen to dive into a little bit more deeper.
Excellent. Thank you, Rebecca. Max, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks, Chloe. Very excited for my first webinar on your e-commerce Explore. So yeah, lovely to meet everyone. My name is Max O'Brien, Enterprise Sales Director at Globally. I've been with Globally a little bit over 6 years, and the business has been around for just over 10 years now, really trying to help brands with going cross-border, or even if you're selling cross-border today, how to do it in the most simple and efficient way. And a lot of that comes in with things like localizing your website, managing logistics to different markets, how to do the customs duty processes, how to then actually manage the local compliance you need to once you get big enough in certain countries. So Globally really is a one-stop shop for all things cross-border. And like Rebecca, really excited to obviously mention what we're seeing in the market, but also hear from everyone in the audience as well. So excited to get cracking.
Awesome. And anyone who's going, what's he talking about? What? Oh, I've got to care about all that stuff. Yes, you do. That's why you came to this webinar. So if any of those are really top of mind, make sure you're asking us questions so we can make sure we're talking about what you want us to be talking about. Last but definitely not least, Emma, welcome. Great to have you here for the webinar. Please let us know a bit more about yourself and your area of expertise.
Absolutely delighted to be here today, Chloe. Thanks for inviting me, especially to be with Rebecca and Max as well. I think they're really important components actually in cross-border. So yes, I work for the Department of Business and Trade, which is the UK government, but I work for the digital commerce team. My background is actually creative agency. More in agency side, building websites, building brands, building international brands rather than being a civil servant. But now I'm a specialist for the UK government to give them that insight on, well, how do you build a website and what do you need to sell overseas? And I lead on the partner system as well. So it's bringing in people like Globally and Primus as well to help merchants sell more and expand globally.
See what a brilliant lineup of guests, panelists we've got here for you to answer your questions. So we've had a few more people join us. I'm going to say it again. Get your questions in if you have those for us. We will be getting, I can see there's some coming in already, so I will be coming to those. But first off, I've got a couple of scene setters that I really want all of your opinions on. So let's start off with what I think is, it's November. Admittedly, the biggest question in everyone's minds is, what am I going to do next week with Black Friday? That's the biggest question in e-commerce. The second biggest question in e-commerce is, how are we going to hit our goals in 2025? And I want to zone that in how we're going to hit our cross-border goals. So I would love the three of you to complete this sentence. The biggest opportunity in cross-border e-commerce in 2025 is, Emma, what do you reckon?
B2B e-commerce. I'm a B2B e-commerce evangelist. I think this is something, as a growth specialist, you know, if you're a D2C brand already selling via your website, then you should be looking at marketplaces and low entry fruit there, lower costs there. But if you're not on B2B, this is really a way for you to start to grow in terms of volumes as well. So smaller profit margins, but great for cash flow. And it's exploding internationally at the moment, either via B2B marketplaces or tech in the B2B SaaS as well, depending whatever your platform you're on, to manage those relationships with distributors and or the end buyers, whichever sector you're in, whether you're in consumer or automotive or aerospace or chemicals. it's B2B e-commerce is the direction of travel. And I'm going to back that up with the fact that 90 countries have signed the agreement by the WTO to further digital.
It's mad, isn't it? Like, I thought when you said B2B, I thought, oh, she's got off piste here. She's forgotten the cross-border world. And then I'm like, no, she's bang on, because B2B is huge in the world of cross-border at all. So I love that answer. Yeah. Thank you, Emma. Max, what's your take on this one? Would you agree? Is B2B the opportunity, or is there something else?
I think from a lot of conversation with brands at the moment, B2B is definitely a hot topic in terms of cross-border. I mean, typically globally, what we're really normally helping brands with is more the direct consumer part. So more on that topic. I mean, it's growing still really, really quickly. I mean, still twice the pace of domestic e-commerce sales. Just to jump onto Melandi's question that was up earlier, I think like markets, you know, in the Middle East, like the UAE and Saudi, Poland and Mexico are countries that brands we're seeing now really, really trying to actually push marketing budgets and look at expanding into countries like that. You know, markets like the US and Europe for a lot of UK retailers is still growing, but there's some real kind of front runners now that are growing in high double digits that we've seen over the last 3 years across our merchants. So I think my biggest opportunity is you're selling internationally, but really look at the countries that are performing well and reacting well to that, and start spending some marketing budget there, because you'll see the returns.
Love that. Love the fact you're bringing in things from the comments as well. Thank you, Max. Rebecca, what's your take on this? Is it looking at which countries you're choosing to target? Is it the B2B piece, or have you got another angle?
No, for sure. I mean, I've got kind of two answers. I think B2B, yes. I mean, we speak to a lot of brands globally, daily, around kind of their expansion, obviously CX and that cross-border feel. And a lot of brands will always say to us, well, we just want to dip our toe, we're going to start doing a B2B model first, whether that'll be, you know, selling through platforms like Zalando, or let's call it, you know, a platform in the Middle East. We're going to sell on Vogue Closet first, just to see if our product resonates in the region. What's that uptake? What's that sales? Because I think a lot of retailers are still very scared of going into new regions unless it's not backed up with data. So if they want to see data, they can then have a much more stronger business case to go to, you know, the C-suite to say, hey, I want to put money behind, let's say, Australia, because of we've sold on 3 B2B marketplaces. This is the revenue we've got. As you said at the beginning, yes, smaller margins, but actually it creates much more of a business case for a retailer to go. And then the next phase, we will then focus on D2C, because we know we've got a customer base there. Then we'll switch our marketing to attract customers directly to our website. Then we need to make sure we're retaining them. We have an end-to-end solution, a reverse logistics in place, but we have a streamlined CX experience, because I think going internationally, you've got one shot at it, technically, in a way. And if you don't do it right from the beginning, you may never get that customer come back again. So I am too for B2B and D2C, but I think a lot of brands go B2B first as okay, we'll go down that route. It's less scary for us. And then we'll switch to D2C 12 months later, so to speak.
Nice. Love it. Oh yeah, go for a quick one, Emma, a quick one.
So Rebecca mentioned something interesting there, like you've only got one shot. So like if you haven't done cross-border before, don't suddenly decide you're going to do the States. You know, you choose a small market that if you make mistakes in, it doesn't affect a bigger market or target audience for you. Unless, of course, and if you're going D2C, then yeah, I mean, a merchant of record, yes, very important. But that's why you would use, you know, Globally, or a company like Globally, because they are the experts. Because to get your marketing right, to get your messaging right, do all the research, they are absolute professionals at this and can totally scale D2C in these markets. And I think Max mentioned like some key markets there, like the Gulf is taking off, you know, but it really depends on your research. You must do your own research.
Yeah, I love the fact that you took us there, Emma, because I was going to just pause from the things I shared with you guys in advance to come back to that question that Max highlighted in his answer from Melandi around what is the most popular location choice for expansion. Obviously not USA first. We all get that. That's just
Yeah.
what shall I do? I'll go for the most difficult market to crack, the largest, the most complicated. Yeah, let's do that first off. Let's not do that first off. So
Yeah.
where are you seeing the opportunities? Where are we going? And try to separate hype from reality if we can, and focus more on the reality. Emma, I'll give Rebecca a couple of seconds to think about this one, and then Max, you can have a second go at this as well. But Emma, what's your take? Where are you seeing people expanding into at the moment?
So it depends where the company's at and like if they're first time exporters. So I'm going to assume people are first time exporters and based in the UK, okay, because that's kind of like my base, if you like. And it's still Europe, so obviously, Brexit happened. And honestly, this is when Globally came into their own as well. They were great. But it's still Europe because it's close logistically. It's not too different on the time zones. It's a big market as well. On like Germany and France. I mean, Germany's really growing at the moment, and there is a big appetite as well for UK brands. So, there's legislation, you've got your, ESPR and your EPR, and you've got to register for your VAT. And so get advice on all that. But it is doable, but it is about planning. It's about research. But I honestly, EU, Germany in particular, and then France.
You mentioned the B word, which I wondered how long it was going to take us to get to the B word. 15 minutes, everybody, and we got to the B word. I mean, the thing is, we're now several years down the line, and there may be more to do, but everybody now knows how to do it, and it's easy to access the problems. You're not making it up as you were when it all first came in. We've now got the method. So yeah, I totally love that answer. Thank you, Rebecca. What's your one on this? Where should we be going?
Do you know what? I think a market that I always think is kind of not the poor relation, but the Nordics. And being in Sweden last week and kind of listening to a lot of brands who originate from the Nordics, we're talking about kind of UK brands looking to sell or looking to have a presence in the Nordics. And I think it is a market that everyone kind of goes, okay, I need to do cross-border. Let's do EU first. Then we'll tackle EU. Then we will tap into the US, but we may go B2B first to the US and go and sell on Nordstrom. And then we'll sell D2C. And then everyone kind of doesn't look at the Nordics as a region as well, because it is close to get to. But I think another one for me, just being on the ground a lot over there, is the Middle East. It's the UAE and Saudi. I mean, the population of consumers sitting in those regions, Saudi alone, 42 million consumers who are tech savvy, digital age of average age of around 32. So you've got an audience there who have got cash rich, they've got time, they want to spend. But again, it's that brand who are then, we've never really worked in Saudi. What do we need to do? So yeah, I would say those are my two markets personally. EU, yes, but I feel like there's a lot more to establish in those two markets, is my opinion.
Nice. And Max, you've already kind of answered this once, but is there anything you'd like to add on where we should be going to?
I think between Rebecca and Emma, they've both highlighted really good other options. I think the Nordics, I completely agree with Rebecca, is a market where it's seeing from a like outbound expansion growing really quickly, but consumer kind of like consumption is definitely going up there. I think naturally brands are looking at the US first because the de minimis is pretty high. Obviously English speaking, dollar, GBP, there's not too much impact on the currency side. So I think it's very normal to see brands typically going for the US straight away, and then maybe countries like Canada and Australia. But yeah, for me, I mean, Poland is still our fastest growing e-commerce market at the moment. There's a fast growing middle class there, obviously part of the EU and Mexico. So those two are fastest growing, and then Middle East is Saudi and the UAE just must do's at the moment. But again, really not that easy to sell to from a tax and duty management, payment methods, there's different payment gateways needed. So those markets we see performing really well, but they're quite hard to set up for brands. So that's typically we're seeing a big benefit from the Globally platform.
I suspect the big theme of this webinar is going to be don't DIY. People go ask the experts for advice, whether that's the free experts, the paid experts, or what experts. But there's so many ways of fast tracking your chances of success and the amount of time it takes you to do all of this. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Okay, we've talked opportunity. Oh, she says, failing to put the thing up on the screen. What is the biggest challenge in cross-border e-commerce in 2025? We've kind of dribbled into a few of them, but where would you go as the biggest obstacle to overcome, the biggest thing we might be getting wrong at the moment? Who fancies coming in on this one?
I'll take this one, if that's all right.
Go for it.
I would say the biggest challenge in cross-border for next year, even though it's been around for quite a few years and there's technology providers to do it, returns. Because then if you've got an apparel brand, again, typical apparel brand, average of around 30% of their outbound is coming back through returns. So many brands are just spending so much money on returns coming back, whether it's coming back to the UK, to their 3PL. And then by the time they've received the product back and you can't resell it and you can't do anything because they haven't got the operation in the ground, let's call it US or EU, they're just trusting that customer is sending that return back on the gesture of goodwill, so to speak. Either it's paid for by the brand or it's paid for by the consumer. It depends on the size of the business. But returns is always going to be a headache. I think it will always be a topic of conversation. The topic, obviously, everyone wants to go to is how can we make returns profitable? And I'm like, I think you can get to that, but I don't think we're anywhere near it. Personally, my opinion, just listening to brands who have been around for years and they still don't have it cracked. So for me, I see that as the biggest challenge in cross-border e-commerce.
Nice. I like that answer. Okay, we've got returns. Who's got something to raise returns? Emma, what's your take on this one?
Well, expand it out a bit further in terms of supply chain, actually, which I think is, returns are kind of part of that. So it's knowing where to hold stock and at which warehouse to hold it in as well when you're going cross-border. So for example, one of the easiest ways to enter a market is via the marketplaces, as we've talked about already, because they're responsible for driving the traffic. It's up to you to optimize your product and the images. But then a lot of them, the marketplaces, for example, in Saudi and the UAE, will insist that you have to have stock in market. So then you've got to be legally compliant for that market. You can't sell cross-border. It's got to be legal. And also, how much stock do you hold? So then when you're doing your production, what part is Arabized? How much isn't? So it's your whole supply chain and managing all that information. So it's always about data and data management, so that then you know that you can plan, because it's always going to be that forward planning on how you can control your growth.
Oh, I'm getting flashbacks to last week, which is a properly rude thing to do as the person who's in charge of this, referencing an event that almost none of you were at last week. A lot of talk about data at the event Emma and I were at last week. Absolutely.
But it is about data.
Yeah. Max, would you agree? Is it returns? Is it data? Is it supply chain? Or is there something else that's the biggest thing, the most difficult thing to get right for next year?
I think both points are very, very valid and saying the same thing. I think just to add 2 points on top, I think to Rebecca's point, returns are obviously big, but we see a lot of brands struggling at the moment with high shipping costs on the outbound as well. So, since COVID and fuel surcharges have been ramped up by the major carriers, a lot of brands are struggling to get decent rates with the major carriers. That then has a knock-on effect of obviously getting decent prices to the customer at the checkout level, which will then hamper sales. So outbound logistics is definitely still a challenge. It's 50% of shoppers still are finding it hard to transact with international brands because of the shipping cost. And then just on Emma's point around I guess kind of like enabling and getting into local markets, marketing costs again through, iOS 14 and the Metas of the world and Google's, it's becoming really hard to acquire customers and expensive. So they're big challenges for brands wanting to expand, and, maybe a B2B model to start with to test the market. A lot more of these are bigger challenges for businesses now to manage. So yeah, outbound shipping costs and marketing costs are big challenges in cross-border at the moment, but let's see if that changes in 2025.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? 'Cause it's like we're going to these other markets because they've got more growth and there's less competition. But at the same time, it's not like suddenly Google ads and Facebook ads become a penny an order. It's really good one to bring up there, Max. Thank you. Oh, we're getting loads of great questions coming in, guys. We will work our way through those, but we've got a couple of big bits I want to ask the panelists first, and then we will go into the lovely nitty-gritty questions you're sending in. So please do keep those coming in via the chat. So let me play devil's advocate here. I reckon, given the competition levels that there now are in the UK and the US e-commerce markets in particular, that if you're plotting out a 5-10 year e-commerce growth plan, you cannot afford to not put cross-border on that if you want to maximize profits and potential within your business. That's my assertion. Am I right? Am I wrong? What caveats would you add on that? Is this true? Is this not true? Rebecca, you're almost smiling whilst the other two are looking slightly thoughtful. So I'll make you answer this one first.
Oh no, I'm like, don't come to me on this one. No, it's fine. It is a tough one. Look, no one has a magic wand. No one knows what the future of shipping costs are going to look like. They're not going to dramatically decrease by 50% next year. They're not. We would love for them to be, but they're not. I still think we have a hangover from what happened 4 years ago, that thing that people still talk about now and again. I don't, because I just think that's old. Move forward, but people still use that as and I'm like, but you can only plan for so much. And you don't have a crystal ball to what the future looks like within these emerging markets. You've just got to, goes back to the original point, data. Retailers want to see data. They want to see insights. They want to see where are we going to back which market at which time with which partner or with which, software provider. And I think a lot of that retailers will look at that as a data before they make that jump. But personally, you don't have a magic wand and you don't know what the future holds. But I think sometimes you've got to be a bit bullish and go, we know we can do really well there, but we need the team and we need the C-suite team behind it so we can get to those goals over the next 12 months, 18 months, because we've spoken to so many brands where they're all for a market and then they don't know anything about it because no one's bought into it. So they're just like, well, why are we having the conversation, so to speak? So yeah, it's a tough one. It is a tough one.
Cool. Emma?
There's some stats in there. So there are actually stats for business continuity, the benefit of cross-border or selling overseas via e-commerce. Quite high stats as well, actually, and then there's obviously there's research by people like the WTO, the e-commerce trade commission, like McKinsey's, and they all advocate that as well, that for business growth, especially for small businesses, for them to grow sustainably, and profitably, it is essential for every e-commerce growth plan. So I 100% agree with your statement there.
I'm loving this. 100% agreement. Max, do you 100% agree, or are you swerving a bit?
I mean, it's what I'm talking to brands about every day. So I think it 100% needs to be in their plans. I think for a lot of brands now it is. I think what we're typically seeing is that, especially sales for UK retailers outside of the EU, it's really quite profitable international as well. You've got ability to add margins, play around with the VAT margins for cross-border, rather than selling within the EU and within the UK. So profitability wise, it's a really big impact. And also you're not selling to a market of 60 million people in the UK, you're selling to 7 billion person market, and the stats are, I think cross-border e-commerce market by 2030 is going to be around $7 trillion of opportunity. So I think if you're not doing it, 100% you should. And if you are, I think just keep looking and speaking to key players in the market of which markets, where the product fit could be to constantly keep expanding. So 100% essential for a good growth plan.
Well, on my behalf, huge thank you to all of you, because apparently I'm still vaguely on the money with this one, which is very, very cool for my ego, if for nothing else. Okay, let's do one more of my questiony things for you, and then we'll go to the audience questions, which is, we'll do this one. The aspect of cross-border commerce I see people getting wrong most frequently is, and you can go as nitty-gritty on this as you like. What are the toe-curlingly appalling things? Like when I ran a Google Ads agency, it was people turning on Google Shopping campaigns and not optimizing them. Like, why are they doing that? So what's your equivalent of that? What is the thing that you keep seeing people getting wrong when it comes to cross-border that's frustrating? Emma's right in there.
I'm sorry, this takes me right back to my branding and marketing days, and it's not localizing and it's not understanding the local market. Like, for example, we've talked a lot about the Middle East, so you have to Arabize your content, and you have to understand the cultures there, you have to understand the influence there. I live in the southwest of England, okay, and they put beach huts on beaches here, which I find very odd. I mean, I lived in the Middle East for 17 years. I never saw a beach hut. And I once had a client, and they decided that they wanted to sell to Europe, not the Middle East, but, and they had beach huts in their visual language. And I'm like, it's only in the southwest of England you put a beach hut on the beach. Do you know what I mean? It's a very English thing to do. But it's not understanding, they don't localize content. They don't think about, it depends on your target market, but what's happening locally, even in their region, or like the States, for example, they'll go, I'm going to do the States, and they treat it like one place, whereas it's like 50 different markets that, and you need your strategy accordingly, and very different influences as well. So it's localization for me, understanding who are you really trying to target and what motivates them in where they live.
I love that you brought up localization within the country as well, because the number of people I've seen go, we're just going to turn on Google Ads for the whole of the USA, and you're like, do you know how thinly you are spreading your budget and how varied the people are across all of that? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Also in the Gulf, there's a big misunderstanding there. Like the UAE, very different culturally to Saudi, Qatar, Bahrain. Very, very different. It's not one.
I can echo that, Emma, for sure. It's exactly localization. If you're going to do a cross-border shipment, let's call it from the UK into Saudi, if okay, fair enough, there's a population of Westerners living in Saudi, in Riyadh specifically, but there should be a choice that they can track their parcel in localized language in real time. They have something that's tailored to them. This could be a VIP customer who buys from your store, let's call it in Riyadh Park, all the time, but they've switched to D2C for one time only, and they've had a misjointed experience from their omni-channel, from their physical store to their online. And I do think there's still a very big disconnect when it comes to offline and online. And I don't see how brands can't mirror the same or have the same experience of going in and having a white glove experience for one, but then you may not be able to get to that physical store. So you switch to online because of ease and next day delivery or standard delivery. But then you want to be seen that you are actually being hyper personalized, whether that is in your local language, your local currency, if it's a drop off point and it's got all the nuances around, there's no postcodes in the UAE and things like that. So there's those elements that I think is the biggest driver for success in cross-border, is localization, and be very personalized to that consumer, whether they're a first-time customer, a twice-a-year customer, or every 30 days. there's different ways you can, work with the retailer and through the technology to do that. And that is something we do very closely with a lot of our brands around that final mile localized experience piece. So,
and if you screw up with with an international push, or if you go in very minimum viable product, obviously there's going to be an element of MVP in there. But if you go very, and you've got customers who know your full impact, you can really erode brand values. Max, what's the thing you're seeing most people getting wrong with cross-border at the moment?
It can be deemed, I mean, we see a lot of brands relatively early on their kind of growth journey trying to have stock in too many locations for really what, being a D2C brand and trying to have warehousing in the US when most of your orders are going under the $800 threshold, a lot of the time doesn't make sense. So I think we see a lot of brands trying to make life harder for themselves, because the idea is, I'm not fully localized if I don't have stock in the local market. You can ship with express carriers from Europe, the UK, there's actually quicker transit time than a domestic US shipment, for example. So we see a lot of brands put stock in the local market. There's obviously reasons for doing that outside of D2C, for retail or, distribution reasons. But I think D2C brands, if you are looking at going international, doesn't always mean putting stock in a local market. You can ship internationally quickly. Obviously need to negotiate some good rates, but that's something I can definitely help with. There's elements around customs that obviously you need to take care of, but a lot of brands put a lot of cost into their P&L by buying loads of stock, putting it in a local market, and then not being able to utilize it and ship it anywhere in the world, because you're becoming more reliant on multi-warehouses. So that's something we see in brands just starting out, just going, I need to have a local warehouse because that's what I need to do. But you've got carriers like DHL can do arguably next day to major markets to most of them. So that's always an interesting conversation, but there's not a right and wrong to that.
I'd imagine, Max, that's one of those times where you get people going, what? I'm allowed to do it without a warehouse in the country. And like, mind blown. Oh, right. Oh, all of a sudden there's a whole chunk of my project that I don't need to worry about anymore. We've had a question come in that relates a little bit to that, which is how do we go about keeping shipping and return costs to a minimum? Obviously, the advice of not putting a warehouse in the country increases our shipping and return costs somewhat, but overall improves our P&L. But how do we go about delivering, let's say, the cost-effective, good customer service shipping and returns ideas? I might not come to all three of you for this, but I guess probably Rebecca, is this one in your wheelhouse more than anyone else's to kick us off?
Yeah, I think solutions we've implemented around shipping and returns, I mean, they're both major key things in any business, small, medium, or enterprise. I think when it comes to, let's do reverse logistics first, of if you're shipping a parcel from the UK, let's call it to Australia, and then you need to send that parcel back in some capacity, there's no way around it. That is going to be inexpensive. Unless if you're shipping it all the way back to the UK, you're going to be paying double figures. But then there is obviously ways of having consolidation centres or partners who can do that for you, bringing that stock back in from Australia and landing it in Dubai. I mean, it's the centre of the world kind of thing. So if you were going to move it, you would bring it back in. And then where my mind goes is then, okay, well, how can I then resell that product then in market, whether that's through B2B, back to the first original question, B2B from a sustainability, which I think one of the questions that came up in one of the comments. So how can we be sustainable of that piece? And then how can we provide a quick response back to the consumer around a return? But how can we then tell the retailer that the product has come back and we can resell it, so to speak? So it is around that refulfillment piece, which is what Anastasia has just put up there. It's keeping that cost low, but knowing that consumers know they have to pay for returns. I know UK is implementing paid returns back again, like Zara, New Look, and all those people. And I don't think people frown away at it. They just want to know they're getting their money back quickly so they can rebuy again. I think from a shipping capacity is what sort of Max kind of just went down on. Yeah, commercials in shipping have gone through the roof with fuel charges and extra hidden charges now added on. It is a pain, and I do feel sorry for some brands at times where they want to grow such a rate, but they can't because of the pure cost of shipping. And it's very volume related as well within this industry, again, which I think we all know on this panel, it is very volume. And then it goes back to, if I don't have the volume, how will I ever get to that number for you to entertain the conversation with me? So yeah, again, it goes back to, I don't have a magic wand, I'm afraid, but I can talk solutions and ways to decrease that in some ways, for sure.
Cool. I've just noticed the time. I noticed one of you has to leave very soon, and I want that person's answer to this question before she goes. So, Emma, given you've lived in the Middle East, you're helping a lot of brands enter the Middle East at the moment. What's your quick answer to this? Because I know you've got to go in a couple of minutes. So,
it's being compliant. It depends on what sector you're in as well. It's not a very exciting answer, and I apologize for this, but it really is about being compliant. It's making sure that you've got Arabization on the packaging, and that if you're using your marketplaces, that you're going to have stock there, and then it's got to be. It's also getting Saudi, getting goods into Saudi through customs is not the quickest. So you've got to make sure that you've got all your paperwork, and that's honestly for D2C, that is where somebody like Globally is just invaluable, and as well with Primus, because they understand this is something they do all the time. So it's use the experts, don't DIY, but also it's the Arabization, it's the localization as well.
So it's definitely one of those cases of there's a tried and tested blueprint for doing this. Go and speak to someone who understands your product sector. So if you're health and beauty, find somebody who's done health and beauty. If you're food, find somebody who's done food, fashion, and then find out from them the tips, the tricks, the processes we've got to go through.
I would even go as far as reach out to DBT if you're a UK company, because there's free advice that's just off the shelf. So don't pay somebody for information that is just free there, and they can give you the people to speak to. They can give you the basics. These are your key considerations that you need to consider. Get all that in place. Do your homework, and then reach out to specialists. Yes, thanks, Chloe, for putting that in there. It is, if you're a UK company, just get the free support first, because it does depend on your category.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much for that. We may come back to this again, but I wanted to come back to keeping shipping and return costs to a minimum. Emma, you got any points you'd like to add on to this one from what we were just saying?
No, well, on the returns, I was going to say there are people that will check products in market, and then somebody was saying about the sustainability. So if you get another sale, then they can repurpose that. And there are specialists that do that for you to try and help keep costs down. So yeah. And on that note, I will say thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and see you soon.
Cheers, Emma.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, bye.
So Max, when it comes to these shipping and returns costs, the thing I'm getting from Emma and Rebecca's answers is it's not just about the price you negotiate with the courier. It's about looking at the whole piece and how that full thing impacts both your P&L and your customer experience. So it's not quite a how can we reduce our price per parcel scenario. Is that how you find it with brands? It's more of an all-encompassing discussion.
Yeah, I mean, that's normally the forefront of the discussion with a brand. They're like, can you get me better rates? And typically from what we see, because globally we use around 20 carriers out of the UK, and we do big volumes with a lot of the major carriers. So there's normally a saving we can pass on to a brand from a shipping point of view. However, shipping is, and logistics is, how are your team managing customer service for escalations with customs correctly? Have you got all your paperwork done correctly so you're clearing customs quicker? Obviously, if you go down the route of managing stock in the local market, that will obviously have an impact in your P&L. Have you got the volumes there? Have you got the distribution agreement? So you're right, it's a lot more than just the rate, but there is also all these other factors that you've got to take in. Do you need to bolster your team if you're going out to more of these markets that you need to be taking into consideration, as well as trying to negotiate with the carriers as hard as you can? And then you can go down to levels of, do you go for the higher levels of service and obviously slightly higher price, or do you go slightly cheaper and get a slightly lower quality of service? All of that are factors that the brands need to take into depending on what vertical they are and the countries they want to ship to.
Okay, good answers. Let's now go to that question I gave to Emma, but didn't let either of you answer, which is the Middle East question. Clearly, we've already identified it as an area of great potential. There's a lot going on in that sector of the world in terms of market growth, in terms of opportunity. There's tried and tested blueprints now. Max, you're nodding away. What do you find to be the biggest hurdle to get into the Middle East? Is it just, as Emma was saying, compliance in all its forms, or are there any nitty-gritty bits or other angles you'd come to for this one?
I think specifically UAE and Saudi, on top of what Emma said, I think you know, obviously you need to be managing dirhams and riyals, which also aren't typically easy currencies that most platforms can, you know, manage, and you have different price files for. So you know, it can get expensive if you're not paying in your local currency. So for shoppers there, that's a big first thing. And then typically translating an Arabic website as well. So that's a big cost. There's obviously a bigger cost to do it right, rather than kind of machine translation, looking at more human and maybe even a hybrid approach. Obviously, reading right to left versus left to right. So those are two big kind of like localization and conversion impacts that you need to do. And plus, they have different ways of paying. There's cash on delivery, which is popular in the Middle East. That's less cash post-COVID, but that's more payment on delivery. So, you know, carriers will come to your door and you can pay via Apple Pay or Google Pay or even credit cards. So those are typically your more kind of local needs that customers will want, and that brands and retailers would need to obviously implement to go into the two key markets that we're typically seeing in the UAE and Saudi. Outside of compliance and customs and stuff like that, those are big points that you need to address.
It really is. I mean, taking the Middle East as a kind of a case study for any market entry. No stone unturned, people. That's the approach. Think of everything. Everything has the potential to be completely different, even if you're studying into a country that seems similar to the one you're in. Rebecca, any additional advice from you on the Middle East entry plan?
No, for sure. I think again, going back to returns again, you know, returns are not as high in the Middle East. Typically, around 15% of apparel is coming back in returns, because returns has never really been something that they've adopted in the Middle East, like we have in the UK and the EU and the US. So returns to them, especially for an Emirati, a Saudi, or even a Westerner, returns is one of those, no, I feel rude sending it back, so I'm just going to gift this to somebody else, whether that's my friend, my neighbor, my colleague. I'm not going to send it back, because they're not that sensitive of, well, I need the money back. It's very much, well, it doesn't fit, I'll pass it to somebody else. So when we speak to retailers and brands that we work with in the Middle East, you know, returns are very, very low. So it's never really even like the top 3. It's always like in the top 5, and it tends to be more at the bottom around, okay, well, how can we localize our returns experience if we are sending a product back to the UK or to the US or wherever? But yeah, returns are much, much lower. But I think it goes back down to, you've got to know the audience in the GCC. From the UAE, it's a very small population. Everyone goes, we need to be in the Middle East. And it's like, okay, but where? Oh, Dubai. Okay, why Dubai though? Oh, well, that's where everyone is. It's like, no, that's the smallest population. It's 3 million people that live in Dubai versus Saudi, where it is 42 million. So why would you not put your efforts into a much more, oh, we don't really know Saudi, because people have the perception of Saudi. Or what about Bahrain or Qatar or Kuwait or Oman? The long tail markets, but then where people forget is the long tail markets like Morocco, Egypt. You've got a lot of cash rich people living in those markets who live on the tail end of the GCC, who probably travel across, you know, the UAE and Dubai Mall and things like that, but then want that experience back to D2C. So they want that localized experience when they're back in the comfort of their home, making that purchase. So yeah, I would say localization is super, super relevant. To succeed as a brand in that region, you've got to be very, very personalized, without a doubt.
Quick question for you, Rebecca. What's GCC stand for?
It's called the Gulf countries. So basically, GCC is like the whole of the region. So that
Right.
GCC covers Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi, UAE. That's your Gulf region, and then your long tail is then Egypt and Morocco. So,
thank you. I was getting GC. I don't know what the GCC is. I'm not too egocentric to ask that question. So I'll ask that question.
No,
Okay, cool.
definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, guys, you've been putting in so many great questions. We've got there's 2 more I want to try and get answered, and we're starting to run out of time. So let's get Max and Rebecca to give us some quick, punchy answers to these. She says, putting up potentially a question we could have spent the whole hour talking about. This is Powell's question around what sources of information about new markets for cross-border e-commerce can you recommend? Emma gave us an answer before she left, which was to look at Google Trends and then do SEO audits. Quick fire other sources of information that you would each recommend. Max first, please.
I think definitely Emma and the Department of International Trade's reports, we look at those quite regularly. So definitely those. I mean, Globally has its own as well across our 2,000 brand merchant base. So for anyone who wants to take a look at those, more than happy to share. But your main major platforms, your Shopify's, your carriers as well, will have access to where the shipping volume and transactional volumes are going. So I would recommend those.
Cool. And I should say, for anyone who's tuning in who's not in the UK, your country will have a version of our Department for Business and Trade. It changes name about every 5 years, but you will have a version of that who are very keen to help you work out how to export. So they will be there to help you if you're not here in the UK. Rebecca, any to add to Max's list there?
The only one I would add is probably Gartner as well. So obviously they're very insightful in data. They have thousands of teams working behind the scenes around different market trends, what's happening. So a lot of tech providers do reports with the Gartner team as well. I know we're talking to them at the moment about kind of our future plans, and they've got a lot of data that I've seen that's under the bonnet that I don't think a lot of people know, that you can just go on and download a white paper or download an e-booklet around different ways. And of course, there's obviously different providers who can provide that, like Globally for one. And then we do have different ways of data that we have in our system at Premise, but there's different ways that retailers want to access it, but Gartner is very, very good from a data perspective.
Cool. I wouldn't have thought of Gartner for overseas expansion. So that's another one for me to add to my list. And then the other question from the audience, I really wanted to get to you guys, partly because it's talking about marketing. I don't think we've talked enough about marketing in this webinar. Personal, obviously, issues here. Mubashir has asked, while entering in a new global market with your localization mindset, loving that you've picked up on that already, Mubashir, why are we not talking about creators as a marketing plan? And I've double checked what Mubashir means by this, and we're talking about social media, i.e. TikTok creators as a market entry strategy. I mean, they're clearly going to have a place in the market strategy. I could deliberate for several hours as to whether their initial entry or growth strategy to do this. What would you guys say? At what point do we go after creators and influencers to help us localize, to help us get our messaging right? Can it be as simple as going on TikTok and asking some local TikTokers to create on-brand content? Rebecca,
yes and no. I've got a love-hate for social influencers personally. I am an Instagram user, and I do go on and I do see things like, oh, that's nice, I'll save that for later. I don't personally go to social to find the next big thing. I just don't. But again, if you're a certain brand wanting to enter into different regions, influencer selling and creator selling does work. So if you look at Dubai, again, going back to the origin, everyone thinks Dubai is everything of the Middle East. People will go, well, we're going to do some gifting with certain people who live out there. But you can get very stung by doing that as well. You've got to be very specific of which creators you work with to represent your brand. And I've heard some horror stories with fashion brands who have promoted different things on their socials and it isn't in line with their brand, so they've had to take them down. Then it's set them back 2 years because they haven't validated that creator as much as they should have done. So yeah, I am 50-50. I'm love-hate on that. But I do see for certain categories and certain brands, using influencer or creator selling can give you that tip into the market, because it can fly. You know, if you send one post out or one creator, and it can completely change your business overnight. But can you grow on that? I'm not sure. That's not my mindset, and I'm not a professional on that. It's just my personal opinion. It can go really well, or it can fall flat.
But definitely, if we've never done it before and we've never done an order and we don't have our ops set up, we definitely shouldn't do it. But if we're good at creators, it could be a good
100%.
angle. Max, what's your take on this?
I agree. I think also you've got to dip your toe in a little bit to see whether there is the demand. But I think if there is the demand, you need to quite quickly sort out the platform and the website so it can transact, and obviously you know, all of the different bits that we've talked about already, all of that operation is in place. So yeah, it's a mixture of the two, and it's chicken and egg really, isn't it? What do you start with first? You also don't want to do all the setup to then realize that that's not a market. So I think you've got to be sensibly curious of trialing it at the beginning, but sorting it out quite quickly.
Sensibly curious. Oh, I might have to steal that. That is a phrase and a half. Thank you, Max. Okay, I've got my takeaway from this now, sensibly curious. But what I'd love to know, final answer to you, Rebecca, and to you, Max. If we have covered so much ground in this webinar, if someone watching this, maybe they've done some expansion overseas, maybe they are looking for their first cross-border opportunity, what's the key piece of advice you would like to leave them with as we head into 2025? And we've got about a minute and a half for each of your answers on this, so no pressure. Who fancies going first with your final thought?
Okay, first.
No,
Max.
Go for it,
Max, it's all yours.
I think depending whether you've started or not, you know, international, you do need to be trying to maximize the opportunity there. I think you know, everyone agreed earlier that it's an essential part of a successful e-commerce, you know, business growth plan for next year and obviously years to come. It's not easy though, and I think use the resources and, you know, people like Emma from the Department of Trade to understand what you know, to get as much advice as you can before taking that leap. But at the same time, you've got to take the leap at the same, you know, you've got to take that leap and not be always cautious of potential new opportunities and, you know, breaking into new markets. So I think take the leap, you know, take it. I'm going to sensibly curious again on that international, but don't be too cautious that you're not willing to jump. So just do it.
Nice. Thank you, Max. Rebecca, your final thought.
I would say, yeah, pretty much echoing kind of what Max said. But for me personally, is always, if you don't start, you'll never know. So you've got to just dip your toe in that water. Just make sure you've got the buy-in from your team, your business, that you're stepping into a market. It is a little bit of the unknown, but with the right suppliers and the right solution and the right strategy, it will change over time. But if you don't start, you'll never know. And you could be losing an opportunity because you're too scared to do that, or you've got other fires in the business you need to put out, that you keep putting it on the back burner, which is a lot of brands do. So for me, yeah, just dip your toe in and then aim big. And that aim big could be 5 years plan. It could be 2 years, and you could be surprised. You just don't know. So yeah.
Brilliant. Your toe in the Love it. Thank you both so much for being part of this webinar. I will see you in the green room shortly. Thank you. So everybody, Emma left me with her top tip at the very beginning of this, which was that whilst there is always a point where you need to pay for the advice, there is often an awful lot of free advice on helping you solve these challenges. So do scout around and try and find those, you know, those cheeky reports you can download for free, those help you can get from your local government or from other groups who will give you this information, webinars like this one, to get your knowledge up. So then when you start spending money on things, you know you're spending it on the right things. That little bit of self-knowledge beforehand can be super powerful. So that was Emma's final thought for all of you. My final thought is that you should really make sure you join us for our next 2 webinars. They're both available for you to sign up to right now on the webinar website. That is webinar.ecommerceexplored.com. And in December, we're getting into the topic that kind of kicked this one off, B2B e-commerce. What should our 2025 strategy be? You'll have to tune in to find out if cross-border comes into that one. But we've got the brilliant Kathleen Sullivan-Garman joining us, Jason Greenwood and Alex Weston. So like a B2B e-commerce powerhouse for that one. That's coming up in December. And then on the 22nd of January, 2025, we will be doing our annual "What does it take to be successful this year" session with no speakers announced yet. That's all coming soon, but you can sign up to both of those right now and make sure you don't miss them. They're in your calendar and all that kind of good stuff. As always, we do make the replays for all of these available pretty much immediately. So watch out for the email you'll get later on today with details of that. Why not watch it with your teams? You know, if you're trying to convince your team that you should be expanding globally, get them all to watch this together. Use it as a Kickstarter for that plan to help you get all those different parts of the business working together. And you will also get a link to help you book up to those two as well. So thank you so much for joining us, whether you've come here live or whether you've watched the replay. Thank you so much for watching another of our eCommerce Explored sessions. Cheers. Bye.